Today's topic is diabetes mellitus. Myself, Dr. Sheetal Sheth, Department of Pathology. So the topics we'll be covering are general introduction about diabetes mellitus, classification, gross differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus, etiology and pathophysiology, risk factors, clinical features and manifestation, complication, lab diagnosis and management. So, what is diabetes mellitus? It is a syndrome with disordered metabolism and inappropriate hyperglycemia due to either a deficiency of insulin secretion or a combination of insulin resistance and inadequate insulin secretion to compensate. Classification of diabetes mellitus. It is basically classified on the basis of pathogenic process that leads to hyperglycemia as opposed to earlier criteria such as age of onset or type of therapy. The two broad categories are type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus, and both types of diabetes are preceded by a phase of abnormal glucose homeostasis as the pathogenic process progresses. The term insulin dependent diabetes mellitus and non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus are obsolete now, since many individuals with type 2 diabetes mellitus eventually require insulin treatment for control of glycemia. Age is basically not a criteria in the classification system, although type 1 diabetes mellitus most commonly develops before the age of 30 and autoimmune beta cell destructive process can develop at any age. It is estimated that between 5 and 10% of individuals who develop diabetes mellitus after age of 30 have type 1 diabetes mellitus. Likewise, type 2 diabetes mellitus more typically develops with increasing age but is now being diagnosed more frequently in children and young adults, particularly in obese adolescents. Now, moving forward towards the etiological classification of diabetes mellitus, which is one is the type 1 diabetes. Beta cell because of beta cell destruction, usually leading to absolute insulin deficiency. And underlying subclassifications are, or you can say etiology of type 1 diabetes are immune mediated and idiopathic. Another classification is type 2 diabetes, which may range from predominantly insulin resistant with relative insulin deficiency to a predominantly insulin secretory defect with insulin resistance. Other specific type of diabetes mellitus are genetic defects of B cell function, genetic defects in insulin action, disease of exocrine pancreas, which include pancreatitis, pancreatectomy, neoplasia, cystic fibrosis, hemochromatosis, fibrocalculus, pancreaticopathy. Which are the gross differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus? So, the previous name of type 1 diabetes mellitus was insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, also called the juvenile onset diabetes mellitus, and previous name of type 2 was non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, also called maturity onset diabetes mellitus. As earlier mentioned, age of onset of type 1 is usually during childhood or puberty, and for type 2 frequently after the age of 35. Pattern of onset: for type 1 it is abrupt, symptom develop rapidly, and for type 2 it is slow and symptom appear gradually. Prevalence for type 1 is 10% of the diagnosed cases and 90% of the diagnosed cases in type 2. Genetic predisposition is moderate in type 1 and very strong in type 2. Nutritional state at time of onset is, type 1 is undernourished and in type 2 is mostly obese. What is the biochemical defect? In type 1, autoimmune destruction of beta cell in 90% of the cases and in remaining 10% cause it not known. Thus, there is impaired production of insulin. In type 2, insulin resistance combined with inability of beta cell to produce appropriate amount of insulin. Plasma insulin in type 1 low to absent and in type 2 high in the early stage, low in the disease of long duration. Acute complications for type 1 are hypoglycemia and ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma for type 2 diabetes mellitus. Frequency of ketosis is very common in type 1 and it is rare in type 2. Treatment for type 1 is insulin is always needed. Oral hypoglycemic drugs are ineffective. And for type 2, diet, exercise, oral hypoglycemic drug, and insulin if it is severe case. Moving forward to the etiology of type 1 diabetes, as we already mentioned, it is two etiology, immune mediated and idiopathic. Immune mediated, the rate of pancreatic beta cell destruction is quite variable, being rapid in some individual and slow in others. Approximately one third of the disease susceptibility in immune mediated type is due to genes and two-thirds of environmental factors. Idiopathic, less than 10% of subjects have no evidence of pancreatic beta cell autoimmunity to explain their insulinopenia and ketoacidosis. This subgroup has been classified as idiopathic type 1 diabetes and designed as designated as type 1B. Although only a minority of patients with type 1 diabetes fall into this group, most of these are of Asian or African origin. Here is the pathophysiology of type 1 diabetes, which include autoimmune destruction of the pancreatic beta cell. So pathologically, the pancreatic islets are infiltrated by the lymphocyte in a process termed insulitis. After all beta cells are destroyed by any kind of viral infection, the inflammatory process abates, the islet cells become atrophic. The autoimmune destruction of pancreatic beta cell leads to deficiency of insulin secretion. It is this loss of insulin secretion that leads to the metabolic derangement associated with IDDM. Etiology of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Type 2 diabetes mellitus, formerly also called NIDDM or adult onset diabetes mellitus, is a disorder that is characterized by high blood glucose in the context of insulin resistance and relative insulin deficiency. Circulating endogenous insulin is sufficient to prevent ketoacidosis, but it is inadequate to prevent hyperglycemia in the face of increased needs owing to tissue insensitivity. Genetic and environmental factors combine to cause both the insulin resistance and the beta cell loss. The disease is polygenic and multifactorial since in addition to genetic susceptibility, environmental factors such as obesity, nutrition and physical activity modulate the phenotype. The mechanism by which these genetic alteration increase the susceptibility to type 2 diabetes are not clear. Coming to pathophysiology of the type 2 diabetes mellitus, type 2 diabetes mellitus is characterized by impaired insulin secretion, insulin resistance, excessive hepatic glucose production, and abnormal fat metabolism. In the early stage of the disorder, glucose tolerance remains near normal despite insulin resistance because the pancreatic beta cell compensates by increasing insulin output. As insulin resistance and compensatory hyperinsulinemia progresses, the pancreatic islet in certain individuals are unable to sustain the hyperinsulinemia state. Impaired glucose tolerance, which is known as IGT, characterized by elevation in the postprandial glucose that then develops. A further decline in insulin secretion and an increase in hepatic glucose production lead to overt diabetes with fasting hyperglycemia. Ultimately, beta cell failure may ensue. This is the flowchart again showing the pathophysiology of the type 2 diabetes mellitus. Which are the risk factors for the type 2 diabetes mellitus? Includes family history of the diabetes, like parent or sibling with type 2 diabetes, obesity, the person having basal metabolic index of more than 25 kg per meter square, habitual physical inactivity, race or ethnicity like African American, Latino, Native American, Asian American or Pacific Islander. Previously identified as impaired glucose tolerance, history of delivery of baby of more than 4 kg, hypertension, blood pressure of more than 140 by 90 mmHg, high density lipoprotein cholesterol level of less than 35 mg per deciliter, and or triglyceride level of more than 250 mg per deciliter, polycystic ovarian syndrome or acanthosis nigricans, and history of vascular disease. These are all risk factors for the type 2 diabetes mellitus. Coming to glycated hemoglobin, which is known as HbA1c. So what is it? Hemoglobin becomes glycated by ketoamine reaction between glucose and other sugar and the free amino group on the alpha and beta chain. The major form of HbA1 is hemoglobin HbA1c, where glucose is carbohydrate. HbA1c comprises 4 to 6% of total hemoglobin A1. The HbA1c fraction is abnormally elevated in diabetic person with chronic hyperglycemia. Coming towards clinical manifestation and complications of diabetes mellitus. Clinical manifestations of type 1 diabetes mellitus include polyuria, which is the increased urination, and then thirst, polydipsia, increased thirst, then weight loss. Despite normal or increased appetite is a common feature of type 1 when it develops subacutely. Lowered plasma volume produces symptoms of postural hypertension, total body potassium loss, and the general catabolism of muscle protein contribute to the weakness. Paresthesia. This is the most common complication of the diabetes mellitus. It may be present at the time of diagnosis, particularly when the onset is subacute. They reflect a temporary dysfunction of the peripheral sensory nerve, which clears as insulin replacement restores glycemic level closer to normal, suggesting neurotoxicity from sustained hyperglycemia. When absolute insulin deficiency is of acute onset, the above symptom develop abruptly. Ketoacidosis, which is most common complication, which exacerbates the dehydration and hyperosmolarity by producing anorexia, nausea, and vomiting, interfering with oral fluid replacement. The patient's level of consciousness can vary depending on the degree of hyperosmolarity. Hypotension in the recumbent position is a serious prognostic sign. Loss of subcutaneous fat and muscle wasting are features of more slowly developing insulin deficiency. In occasional patients with slow, insidious onset of insulin deficiency, subcutaneous fat may be considerably depleted. Clinical manifestation of the type 2 diabetes mellitus. While many patients with type 2 diabetes present with increased urination and thirst, many others have an insidious onset of hyperglycemia and are asymptomatic initially. This is particularly true in obese patients whose diabetes may be detected only after glycosuria or hyperglycemia is noted during routine laboratory studies. Occasionally, type 2 patients may present with evidence of neuropathic or cardiovascular complication because of occult disease present for some time prior to diagnosis. Chronic skin infection are common. Generalized pruritus and symptoms of vaginitis are frequently the initial complaints of women. Diabetes should be suspected in women with chronic candida vulvovaginitis as well as in those who have delivered large babies of more than 4.1 kg or have had polyhydramnios, preeclampsia or unexplained fetal losses. Obese diabetic may have any variety of fat distribution. However, diabetes seems to be more often associated in both men and women with localization of fat deposit on the upper segment of the body, particularly on the abdomen, chest, neck, and face, and relatively less fat on the appendages, which may be quite muscular. Standardized tables of waist to hip ratio indicate that the ratio of greater than 0.9 in men and greater than 0.8 in women are associated with an increased risk of diabetes in obese patients. Mild hypertension is often present in obese diabetic. Eruptive xanthoma is the another clinical manifestation. Coming to the chronic complications of the diabetes mellitus, which we have divided in the vascular complication and non-vascular complication. So vascular complication include again microvascular complication and macrovascular complication. So microvascular complication include first is the ocular complication, which include diabetic retinopathy, diabetic cataract and glaucoma. Neurological complication are diabetic peripheral neuropathy, which can be polyneuropathy, mononeuropathy or autonomic neuropathy, then diabetic gangrene and diabetic foot. Renal complications will be diabetic nephropathy. Macrovascular complications include coronary artery disease, peripheral arterial disease and cerebral vascular disease. Then non-vascular complications include gastroparesis, infection and skin changes. Long-standing diabetes may be associated with hearing loss. Coming towards the last section of the topic is laboratory diagnosis and treatment. Laboratory diagnosis include urine analysis and blood biochemistry to confirm the case of diabetes mellitus, and finally the management of type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. First is the urine analysis. The first should be the detection of the urinary glucose, which is known as glucosuria. It is the first line screening test of the diabetes mellitus. Normally, glucose doesn't appear in urine until the plasma glucose rises above 160 to 180 mg per deciliter. In certain individuals, due to low renal threshold, glucose may be present despite normal blood glucose level. Conversely, renal threshold increases with age. So many diabetic patients may not have glycosuria despite having high blood sugar level. And there are always two methods of diagnosing the glucosuria in the urine, which is manual method, which include Benedict test and Fehling test. As you can see in the figure, the orange color of the test tube, the orange color in the urine is showing the positive Benedict test. And another test, nowadays we are using reagent strip. As you can see in the figure, we have to dip this diastolic reagent strip in the urine and then match the color with the provided meter. Then ketonuria. It is the qualitative detection of the ketone bodies can be accomplished by the nitroprusside test or Rothras test. These tests do not detect the beta-hydroxybutyric acid, which lacks a ketone group. Ketone bodies may be present in a normal subject as a result of simple prolonged fasting. Again, you can see in the figure, the manual test is Rothras test, which is you can see the purple ring formation, which is the positive ketonuria test, and another one is the reagent strip. Then microalbuminuria. It is defined as an albumin excretion rate intermediate between normalcy and microalbuminuria. The small increase in the urine albumin excretion is not detected by simple albumin stick test and requires confirmation by careful quantization of 24-hour urine specimen. Now coming to the blood biochemistry. Blood glucose estimation, the choice of sample would be plasma or serum from venous blood sample. So fasting blood glucose is a more convenient method than the random blood glucose estimation. So fasting blood glucose is measured after an overnight fast of 10 hours. Fasting blood glucose estimation is better than random blood glucose, as I already mentioned. Fasting plasma glucose of less than 100 mg per deciliter is considered normal. If it is 100 to 125 mg per deciliter, then it's defined as impaired fasting glucose, and if it is more than 126 mg per deciliter, it warrants the diagnosis of diabetes mellitus. Then second one is the glycated hemoglobin measurement. As I have already mentioned, normal range comprises of 4 to 6% of the total hemoglobin A1, and diabetes mellitus in patients of diabetes mellitus, this range of HbA1c is usually more than 6%. Then another method is the self-monitoring of the blood glucose, like measuring the glucose by means of glucometer, glucose strip, and by the capillary blood glucose. Management. The goal of therapy of the type 1 or type 2 diabetes mellitus are to eliminate the symptoms related to hyperglycemia, reduce or eliminate the long-term microvascular and macrovascular complication of diabetes mellitus, and third is allow the patient to achieve as normal as lifestyle as possible. Type 1 diabetes mellitus management. One is the insulin preparation, which can be short-acting or long-acting. Short-acting preparations are regular insulin and the rapidly acting insulin analog. And the long-acting preparation are NPH insulin and the long-acting insulin analog. Some other preparations are mixed insulin preparation. If these two doesn't work, then we can go for islet cell transplantation or the stem cell therapy. Method of insulin administration, it can be by insulin syringes and needles, insulin pen injector devices, insulin pump, or inhaled insulin. Management of type 2 diabetes mellitus, firstly is the weight reduction. If the patient is obese, it will helpful like diet and exercise, and weight reduction will helpful in the management of the diabetes mellitus, and patient may not be needing the use of hypoglycemic agent, but weight reduction is not helping the patient, then we have to go for a hypoglycemic agent, which include one is the insulin secretagogues, which includes sulfonylurea drugs, which are first generation, which include chlorpropamide, tolazamide, and tolbutamide. Second one is the sulfonylurea second generation, which include glipizide, and glipizide extended release. This is the most common drugs The B class second generation are most common drugs used for the management of the type 2 diabetes mellitus, and third category is sulfonylureas, which include repaglitide and netiglitide. Second is biguanides, metformin. It is basically a first line drug for the management of the type 2 diabetes mellitus, the first line drug. Then comes the alpha glycosidase inhibitor, which is acarbose and miglitol, and fourth one is the thiazolidine dians, which include rosiglitazone and plioclitazone. Thank you.